Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
How many things in your house connect to the internet? Let's see. Computers, smartphones, gaming console, maybe your appliances and lights. They say that by the year 2020, the average home will have 5 devices for every one person. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be average. We're going to need much better internet.
Midco Extreme Gig is here. Life-changing.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
As a farm kid from North Dakota, I was raised to face challenges head-on. But that was put to the test when I was diagnosed with cancer as a teenager. Now, I'm determined to help kids overcome illnesses like I did. So I started my journey at the University of North Dakota. With hard work and determination, I'll help others like my doctors helped me. I'm making my impact. How will you make yours?
Good evening. This is the time and place for the Grand Forks Jobs Development Authority. We'll begin with the roll call, please.
Weigel.
Here.
Doctor. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock. Here. Marshall. Here. Sandy. Dean.
Here. And for clarification, do we have Mr. Weigel and Mr. Sandy on? Are they?
Weigel is here.
Oh, we're not hearing from them yet. They're apparently here. We'll hope they're able to join the conversation. JDA action item 2.1, public hearing relating to Startup Grand Forks. A is program guidelines and update. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. We do have a two-part item related to the Startup Grand Forks program. The first part is it's time for our we're 2 years into a 3-year pilot program here, and so we will get an update as well as there's some program description, revisions, corrections that we would like adopted. Then we will have another actual loan request that will come through. We're doing this in the right order, getting the program description updated prior to taking action on a loan request. To talk about the particulars of those, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Baumbach. This has kind of been his baby since Mayor Brown introduced the topic of entrepreneurial ecosystem in his 2016 State of the City speech. So thank you, Mayor, for that. And now I'll let Brandon describe some of the particulars. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Richards. And happy second birthday to the Startup Grand Forks. Mr.
Thank you.
Baumbach.
Very much appreciated. Members of the JDA, it's an exciting program, and as Meredith mentioned, the mayor asked the question during his State of the City address, saying, what can the city do to support entrepreneurship? And at the time, the conversation from that comment forward led to an acknowledgement of maybe helping out with more access to capital and access to mentorship. And from that was the creation of the Startup Grand Forks. It's a program that allows up to $100,000 a year for 3 years, pilot program, to be lent in a format of microloans. And so that's exactly how access to capital was addressed, but what we've definitely come to learn along the way is access to mentorship has been built into the program as intended. The update thus far in the first 2 years has been that there's been 3 successful applications totaling $25,000 lent out through the JDA, leveraging $12,500 from the Bank of North Dakota in this process. It hasn't achieved that ceiling set of $100,000 per year, but that's, as I've seen it, actually been a very positive outcome. There's been a lot of really great conversations. I've been tracking those numbers from the beginning, and I've sat down with 22 different entrepreneurs for an hour at a time to discuss with them their idea. And seeing as how we only had 3 go through the full application and get their funding, it's very positive because there's coaching, there's mentorship, and most importantly, referrals to structures that already exist in town. The Small Business Development Center, SCORE, Center for Innovation, all of these entities can help get them to be in a position that they'd be willing and able to use that money for benefit. So the program has been very successful in that way, and we're looking forward to the 3rd year in this pilot period before we make we get a look at it and make any suggestions of being a permanent program. But along the way, as any pilot program will be, there is small adjustments, and included in your staff report, there's a number of bullet points with keywords of update, clarified language, remove redundancies that you see that are being requested. Just 2 more material changes being requested for this change is adding working capital as an eligible use and removing payroll, lease obligations, and maintenance as ineligible use. All of those uses are very integral to all startup businesses. Perhaps not all startup businesses. Our original intent had envisioned a different type of applicant, but through this experience, we know that these are core uses of these funds. And then secondly, worth mentioning is we had the minimum loan amount from the Growth Fund, or the JDA, at $5,000, and requesting that this be lowered to $1,000. Many smaller companies don't need as much money to get going, but just as important that we help them get going and get in a position where they do need more. So I just wanted to summarize those changes. I wanted to let you know that the program is going very well, and it's doing what it intended to do in both access to capital and access to mentorship. So I would welcome your approval of these changes and happy to stand for any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Bomback. Congratulations on the success of the program so far. Any questions or comments for Mr. Bomback? If not, looking for a motion from Mayor Brown and a second from Ms. Marshall. Any further comments or discussions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Very good, thank you. Item 2.1B, and now we have an application with the guidelines updated. All embracing home care. Mr. Bomback.
Thank you once again. So right on the heels of the policy changes, what the intended policies were to do is to see applications just like these. Tonight I'm joined by Deanna Decimus here in the room. I'd be happy to stand for any questions, but her application is based around starting a company called All Embracing Home Care, which provides services for children, adult families in home, many of those who need managed care, home, and community-based services. She has been doing this for a number of years. She has a strong passion for this project and just needs a little bit of help on the financial side getting going. You can see the application outlines the uses as general business operation, getting going, accreditation with the state licensing, insurance premiums, and then other general startup costs like marketing materials and office supplies. So the request is actually for $5,000, which would leverage $2,500 from the Bank of North Dakota through the North Dakota Development Fund, and $2,500 of her own equity stake in this. It's an exciting opportunity for her, and she's hoping to grow as many part-time positions as 15 as she gets operational. Just a reminder in the process, she has been in front of our loan committee as they've vetted this application and they've given their approval. She has been in front of the paperwork given to the North Dakota Development Fund seeking their approval, and that's been given. And then the Growth Fund Committee has also viewed this and said, given their approval to get her help and get started. So we'll be seeking your approval.
Very good. Again, any questions? Hearing no questions, looking for a motion. Sure. Mayor Brown, and second from Ms. Mock. With that, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Very good.
Thank you.
And with that, that's all we have for the JDA this evening. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Vian, seconded by Mayor Brown. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Adjourned. Thank you.
The City of Grand Forks, the proud home of the University of North Dakota. City Council meeting Monday, May 20th, 2019 is hereby called to order. Welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Doctor. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mog. Here. Marshall. Here. Sandy. Dean. Here. Oh, we have a quorum.
Quorum, thank you. Under 1.2 Mayor's announcements, we had the pleasure and privilege last week of going to Washington, D.C. to thank our National Guard for their service. So Grand Forks is proud to be the home of the National Guard 188th Air Defense Artillery Regiment and the recently redesignated 319th Reconnaissance Wing at the Grand Forks Air Force Base, which is home of the Global Hawk community. And so we met with Air Force officials and the government officials, and the emphasis was on quality of life, education, health care, license reciprocity, tax exemption for retirement pay, and the community partnerships that work with the base and the community looking for win-win solutions. So how do we get to yes? So that was a very productive meeting, and I appreciate staff being involved in that. And next we go to item 2, awards, presentations, appointments, and proclamations, 2.1.
Public Arts Commission of the Northern Rose Sculpture Update.
Mr. Phelan.
Mayor Brown, members of City Council, well, we've talked a lot about public art, and we have a project that we want to bring in front of you. As you recall, and we had, on behalf of Mayor Brown, we had a art, we had an events, and a beautification committees, and Ms. Smock, on behalf of City Council, she helped chair the Arts and Events Mayor's Vibrancy Committee. And as some of you may recall, we've been setting aside 30% of approximately $125,000, which comes to beautification as part of what we move forward. 30% of that is set aside for public art of that amount. So that's approximately $37,500. We've set that aside for the last 3 years. And so all told, we're at about $112,500 that would be set aside for public art. And as you recall from that conversation a few years ago, certainly you need to have art needs to be commissioned, it needs to be selected, and you need to we're facilitating hopefully good public art to happen. And so really our money was set aside for infrastructure. And at the time when we were looking at infrastructure, literally the concrete that would be public art would be set on, it would be the electrical conduit, so that a lot of these pieces need to be lit. And so that was really where our monies were going to be set aside in more of the infrastructure category. This presentation you're going to see this evening was also seen by the Alaris Center Commission, so Mr. Vian saw it as your representative on the commission, because it's in and around where the Canad Inn and Alaris Center is. So kind of moving forward this evening, what I've asked for, we have several members of PAC are here tonight. Mr. Jovig, Mr. Kroon, Mr. Wilford, and Ms. Brown are here that I noticed in the audience. And Mr. Wilford's going to provide you an overall, and as you recall, we were concentrating our efforts on the 42nd Street corridor and also in the downtown area. So Mr. Jovig's going to give you an overview on that. I've asked Mr. Gangler, who's been our representative on the City of Grand Forks, to work with PAC, and Mr. Gaddy on this on the specific piece, because it's a little more extraordinary of a public art piece as our first one going out. So we want to make sure this one is really top of the line. We do this really well so that the pieces that come thereafter, we can really fully have executed this first one. So with that, I'd ask Mr. Jovig and then Mr. Gangler and Mr. Gaddy to give you an update. And I think what PAC is really looking for this evening is that we're on the right track. We should keep moving forward. And so there's a sense of, a city council consensus that we're moving in the right direction. So with that, I'll get out of the way and come up here if I have to.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Mr. Jovig.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The Public Arts Commission was formed in 2014 to provide more aesthetics and beauty to our community. And part of that in 2015, and we presented in 2016 a arts and cultural master plan. And if you remember it brought it to the council, and what that was for, there was a real indication there that sculpture was a big part of this, and to make 2 corridors, one downtown with public sculpture, and also one on 42nd Street. And not that they would be limited to those 2 areas, but there'd be an emphasis in those 2 areas with public sculpture. And we have gone then and we've done some fundraising, and we've raised well over $700,000 towards this goal. And we're bringing you a project today. Well, first I should mention to you that already this year in March, we opened up a PAC exhibition at All True South with about 70 pieces of art there, and plus a gallery featuring 6 artists. This Thursday, the 23rd, we're also opening our second PAC gallery at the Alara Center. So come to the grand opening on Thursday night at 5:30 to 7, where again we feature some more artists. But as a part of this, we also came to the Alara Center asking for approval to start putting the first sculpture in front of the Alara Center. And we received approval from the Alara Center Commission to bring it forward, and that's when we engaged Brad Gengler and A2S to really make sure that we're providing for the safety and security of the site, make sure that it's being engineered well for the sculptures taken. And we have a donor that is good. We've already been working with the sculpture as part of our art selection progress. So the art has been paid for, but the donors want to pay for just the art, and so we're coming to the city to really provide the infrastructure and to make sure what we're doing is safe, secure, engineered well, and will be to meet the community benefit in that way. So that's the purpose for us being here. I'd like to call on now Kurt Kuhn to talk a little bit about the Alara Center approval process and the approval also that we have from Canada.
Welcome, Mr. Kuhn.
Thank you, Bruce, Mayor Brown, City Council members. Thanks for having us here. We appreciate it. I did wear my jeans, but I got socks on, so I didn't not give courtesy to the chamber itself like somebody else I don't. But anyway, what we've done as far as the Alara Center goes is we went through a very detailed process on how to accomplish our goals and work with the Alara Center, work with the city, work with the PAC, so to speak, and worked with Howard's office quite a bit, back and forth about 3 or 4 times. And what we've come up with is a pretty good plan, and I think we'll carry that plan out as what we did with the internal portion of what Bruce just mentioned, is we'll go through that same process with the outside portion. Both the A and the B, if you look at this plan, I think you'll see that in the plan have been approved by the Alara Center Commission so that we can go forward with it. We'd like to get started as soon as possible. It's a construction issue that needs to take place during the summertime, and we've pretty much got that taken care of as far as the design goes, but we want to make sure that it fits in with the city, and that's part of the Alara Center's questions that we had. The commission had all those questions on how that's going to take place, when it's going to take place, and we would really like your approval as well to go through with this. And I handed out the comments that were made by Canad In. Wanted to make sure we had their buy-in, and if you read that, I think you'll see that they're well aware of what we're trying to accomplish, and they're 100% in lockstep with us. They feel that it's something that will attract people to their operation as well as the city. So that's where we're at this point in time. I think we've got a pretty good agreement with the PAC. If you look at just what Canad In, we're asking the city for the engineering plans, which they've done and accomplished already. We're also working with the Park District for the maintenance on it, and then the PAC will take care of the structure itself and maintain that.
Thank you.
Yep,
Any comments
thank
or
you.
questions for Mr. Kruin? No, Mr. Gangler? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Brown, members of the council. We have just a small handful of slides that we'll kind of walk through. A lot of what is included in some of the slides may have already been mentioned. But just in terms of the planning department, we've provided, as Mr. Phelan indicated, some staff support to the group from their inception. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the proposed sculpture and the location, and then get into some more of the details that Mr. Gaddy will cover in terms of the work that will be required to get the sculpture in place. So in 2014, in working with PAC and with the City Attorney's Office, we developed a memorandum of understanding. At this point, it's still in draft form. It hasn't been executed, but it's a document that speaks to the bigger art project throughout the entire city. More specifically, in 2017, we put in place a draft agreement for the installation of art pieces on city-owned property. So once we go through this process, specifically with this sculpture, we would then go back and fill in the blank, so to speak, with the agreement itself to make sure that we've covered all the bases, which are listed on the screen in front of you. So it's kind of your typical agreement between two parties in terms of the rules of engagement, so to speak, as to how this type of art project will come about. So the specific location we're looking at, where the gold symbol is on 42nd Street, on what would be the northeast corner of the overall Alaris and Canad development site. Staff has taken a look at some of the preliminary aspects. The smaller drawing, the inset, shows more of the engineered drawing of where the sculpture would be placed. So understanding there's still some of this legwork to be done, this is just to kind of get you familiar with the project itself. Again, as was indicated, the project did go through the Alaris Center Commission, and then also very recently we did receive that letter of support from the Canad in terms of their approval for the city to move forward. So with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Gaddy to talk some of the specifics about the sculpture and the details involved.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Gaddy.
Good evening, Mayor Brown, members of the City Council. Just real quickly here to give you an overview of the scope of the sculpture that we're talking about and what AE2S has been hired to do in order to support the project and the sculpture placement. The sculpture itself is generally modeled after a sculpture that is already in place and more of a model scale at the North Dakota Museum of Art. That's the picture we're showing you here. The sculpture is quite significant in scale overall as far as what's being proposed. The total dimensions are roughly 20 feet high. So if you think of this 4 feet and then expanded to 20 feet high, roughly 18 foot by 18 foot base diameter overall, with a total weight of around 150 tons. So we're not talking about something small in its scale in the placement location. Brad highlighted just a few of the specifics that we're looking at that corner of 9th and 42nd Street on the southwest corner there. The sculpture itself, just like I said, to give you some sense for the scale, you can see here the artist in the rock quarry actually making some stone selections, and the rocks individually are quite large overall. You've got roughly 6 foot by 20 foot overall scale of each stone itself. And what we've been asked to do in supporting the city for the placement at this location is look specifically, we've talked a little bit about the legal and admin support items, Brad, and others covered that, but AE2S has been asked to look at the site design detail and the overall structural placement of the art in that location. A few key things we'll be looking at. Obviously 150 tons is going to require some foundation consideration, so the sculpture isn't sinking into the ground overall. There's some existing utilities in the area that we'll be reviewing, utility trenches, and making sure that the soil in that area is conducive to supporting it and that we have the appropriate foundation in place. Site design wise, we want to make sure that we're putting it in and it's being minimally invasive in that location. So on a corner, as we consider a piece that tall, we want to make sure that we're outside of the clear zones that are required. So as vehicles are trying to maneuver the turn maneuvers in that location, making sure it's outside of that clear zone. And then also, like I said, making sure it's avoiding utilities and appropriately placed to minimize disruption to any of Canada Inn's parking in that location as well. Currently, as we look at the schedule and what's being considered for the sculpture, in April, May here, obviously, we've been working our way through the approvals. So we've had discussions with the artists, we've had discussions with the Alaris Commission, Canada Inns, and we're here this evening speaking with City Council. In May, June, sculpture will go through actual final selections and consideration within the rock quarry, and we'll finish up, we're proposing to finish up our site design elements, ultimately working to procure construction for the site itself in June, July, in preparation for final sculpture placement here this fall in September. I guess with that, that's the real quick rundown on the technical elements we're looking at. We can go into more detail, but Todd told me he didn't want us to do any footings and foundations calculations in front of the commission here tonight, which is the most significant thing we're looking at.
Well, thank you. Mr. Villa.
Thank you, Sean. Really, we're at the point of this is the first piece out. This is probably larger and heavier and all the things than we anticipated. It is at a location that I think it's fair to say that the commission, you know, it wasn't going through the front door, it wasn't in front of the marquee that they have. We did follow up with Canada Inn. They thought it was a good idea, and they liked the public art, and they probably like it even further because they're not part of the financial responsibility for this. But we did say that we would work on the foundation, some of the infrastructure pieces. This is, we've hired AE2S because this really is it's a structural piece, and so we want to make sure if we do move forward that we've covered all our due diligence efforts in this regard. So with that, it's on the agenda for a presentation. And really what we want to do is similar to what we did with the commission, the Alaris Center Commission. If there are some concerns and that sort of thing, to voice them to us as staff or to the PAC members here. Otherwise, we will continue to work with PAC and bring this to fruition and be good facilitative managers. So with that, we'd take any questions.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Vian?
I think a lot, obviously being at the Alaris Commission, a lot of questions of mine were answered already. Just a couple of extra. The liability, who does the liability, if somebody's on it, they fall or whatever, who owns that liability?
I think Mayor Brown, I think similar to what the galleries that PAC needs insurance and coverage. I think we had a conversation at the Alaris Center Commission. Mr. Swanson did say, well, it's not as simple. It's in the public purview. So I would say the further question would be to Mr. Swanson.
Okay. Mr. Swanson.
Mayor Brown, members of the council, Mr. Vian, without having a factual scenario, I really can't give you much of a question. If your question is whether the city is entirely absolved of potential liability, the answer is no. If the city breaches any duty in the course of maintaining, operating, overseeing the facility, the city may be liable. Under the agreements that have been drafted to this point, there is an obligation, however, on PAC to indemnify the city and hold the city harmless. So it goes through a cascading analysis, but pure question of whether or not the city is absolved from liability, the answer would be no. The next question, if there's insurance involved, whose insurance is responsible? Under the agreements, it'd be PAC's insurance.
And I think that's worth noting. I think hopefully there's more of this that happens, and we'll see this in other locations, and the same issues would be handled similarly. I also like that you talked about the setback, because I think, Mr. Gaddy, you talked about, you know, the requirements at a corner. I think it's, what, 15 feet back in both directions, and you're setting it back far enough so that they won't infringe on that. That's, you know, certainly appropriate and well-being. The foundation, though, will be fairly significant. Is that right? This is not a small piece of art.
Mr. Gaddy.
So foundation-wise, we don't have the final design done, and like I said, we're looking at a few things like old utility trenches and things in the area. We're actually commissioning a boring in that location just to make sure we understand how the ground may have been disrupted, and once we get a few more details on that, we can share that with Todd and Mr. Gengler for what in final form that will look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Weber?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, thank you. So I want to make sure I understand. We have a tentative draft MOU that we've given approval, given a green light to some 4 or 5 years ago. In the meantime, we have not approved an MOU. In fact, the intention is to kind of let this project give the final shape to the MOU, and then we would approve the MOU as part of the approval process. Is that our intention?
I think of the two documents that we've talked about, the MOU and then the actual agreement, I think in this case, most of the elements within the agreement, I think are going to cover what we need to cover for this given project, but I think in the long run, I think the actual overall MOU should still be pursued by the city and PAC to ultimately come to an agreeable document. But I think the agreement itself between, PAC and the city, I think unless there's other factors involved, I think that covers perhaps just this specific project.
I mean, from a purely policy perspective, ideally we would have the MOU in place. This is our agreed understanding, and then we would set up individual agreements per piece of art. But in this case, we're looking to possibly sign an agreement as we continue to modify the MOU. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think at this point, at the discretion of the council, I think that's how things are laying out right now.
Right. The reason I'm pursuing this line of questioning, it is not the job, it should not be the job of the council to make decisions about art. We should have an understanding with an organization like the PAC, and then leave those kinds of decisions up to them. But at this point, we do not have a fully articulated MOU.
Mr. Phelan.
Mayor Brown and Councilmember Weber. I think when you looked at the gallery at the Alaris Center, so the commission has approved an agreement to display art. And I get when we first envisioned this MOU, it didn't probably contemplate I'll call it more of an art gallery inside there. So I think these outside pieces are going to be a little bit different on 42nd. And then I think when we get downtown, if you want to look at an agreement, those might be murals and other things that'll be different than what we're talking about here with this more of a structural and, it's set back and that sort of thing. So I think it would be good. I think these, the gallery, and I think a downtown piece, whatever that may be, mural, whatever else, and something on 42nd, I think will inform kind of at least 3 different options that we have in front of us that relate to public art. And I think that will help inform an MOU. But I think on each piece, we'll probably want some sort of a specific agreement, because when we first were envisioning a piece of public art, we weren't envisioning this. It's much more substantial. So I agree we need a general piece, and as Mr. Gangler said, I think this will help inform that. And just because when we first envisioned this 4 years ago, we weren't really thinking of an art gallery in the Alaris Center, to be frank. It was more of a traditional piece of public art in the outside on a slab of some sort.
Right. These questions aren't meant to be negative about the proposal in any way. So I've used terms like ideally. On the other hand, we can be flexible and nimble in making these kinds of decisions. This is moving away from what I said we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be making decisions about art. But can you give us an idea where the rock's coming from? Is this a North Dakota artist? Those kinds of things. Tell us a little bit about them.
The art selection process, varies from project to project. For example, when Bill Merciel made his gift of $300,000 at $50,000 a year, so we've already we got the money, then we put an RFP, and we got 80 artists, 83 actually, who submitted proposals, and our art selection committee selected that. And now we're waiting for the money to be there over that period of time so we can start construction on it. On this one, the donors came to us with an artist in mind.
Oh,
and so then it went to the art selection committee. It was easy for us because it was one of them actually who submitted art for the national thing. And he's an artist of national and international note in Minneapolis. And he already has, for example, some of his artwork at the Museum of Art. If you know the big rocks out front and it looks like couches and everything else, that's Zoran's work.
Oh.
Then you also might note if you go to the
So this is an artist who already has work here in town?
Yes, he already has work in town. And then also he's got work in Mayville. It's the Sculpture Garden in Mayville. He's got a piece there as well that was paid for by Joe Ewan. down there. And in this case, we have 2 anonymous donors who are paying for this, for the artwork, and also then the Art of Giving, better known as TAG, is also going to be submitting funds for this project as well.
That's significant that the donor has chosen the artist, but that this is an artist whose work is already in town. Probably hesitation to do this, but any kind of cost estimates for the city?
From the city? No, because I don't know what that slab is going to be. My friends from A2S to give me an estimate.
You hate the question, but I have to ask it.
I tried to defer this question through my answer to Mr. Vian. Right now, just based on like some final selections for the foundation design, I would expect the overall construction to be less than 50,000, but that's pending some final decisions that will.
Sure, good. And then one last thing, and then I'll stop. Any updates on the light sculpture?
That is in the process of fundraising, and where we have about 15 different public art projects that are in one stage or another of fundraising, and that is one of them that's in the fundraising phase. And that actually is going to be a longer term one, because we're looking for many donors to get many of the business community to participate in that particular project. But I'm glad you're interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was also pleased to note that this rock work of art represents the strength and courage of the settlers, as it mirrors the rose which survived the brutal winter, scorching summers, and bloomed despite numerous adversities. Surrounded by prairie grasses, this larger-than-life rose, carved from granite in hues of pink and red, reflects the prairie rose, North Dakota state flower. And the northern rose, or prairie rose, first pleased the native inhabitants, then immigrants who arrived later. Still with us today, its delicate beauty belies its strength. So I congratulate the PAC on bringing this forward. And it's a grand project. It's amazing. Thank you very much. Any other council comments? Ms. Mott?
A couple questions. So when we talked about this as a committee, when we were reviewing art, one of the things we discussed was that the city did not really want to be involved in the art selection process or the artist process, that was best left to a group like PAC, because that's more their expertise and that's more of what they're doing. But in terms of process, the city is not involved in the art selection process, but PAC is doing that specifically for each piece, or, you know, if people have issues with the art, and this particular piece doesn't seem to probably have any offensive nature where somebody wouldn't like it, but in the future, you know, art is seen differently by different people. So your process is to just take it piece by piece or donation by donation?
We have an overall policy that we need, each piece needs to be approved through the PAC board and our selection committee. But it differs whether someone says, here's some money, do something good, like Mr. Merciel did, or here is, we're interested in this artist, and find a donor for it, and come together as a contribution. So it is adapted, because when you think about it, the donor, the site selection, and the artist all have to come into agreement. So our process, so we can bring those three together in a common agreement, and of course then also then bring it to the city, because obviously some of this, if not most of this, will be on public land. Some will be on private land and private places, but much of it will be public art is in public places.
Okay, and so there is a process
There is a
involved,
process.
so people could contact PAC
Yep,
if they had
exactly.
questions or concerns. And so then, for more of the city process, the city was only going to be involved in kind of the construction and planning process. Do we have something in place, Todd, for the funding? So right now we have some money set aside, but we're talking about the first piece. So are we doing a cost share approach? Are we investing all that we have in this and we just can't do that again until that money replenishes?
Mayor Brown and Councilmember Mock, we were setting aside 30% each year of that 125. So, you know, that's 37,500. So, you know, we kind of thought maybe each year we would have a public art piece, or at least 37,500 to go towards that. And we were thinking, you know, traditional things like concrete and electrical, you know, things that we have contracts for, that we were in the area to do. So I think this fits in line with that. I think the foundation is going to be a little more substantial than just our ordinary sidewalk contractor to do, so it'll probably be more to that. I think the other piece is we thought of as part of construction projects, if there makes some sense to incorporate public art into those projects, that'd be another avenue for us to do that. So if we're doing, obviously we call it, we're going to do Demers Avenue this summer. We're doing lots of streetscape down there, but if we're public art that could be incorporated, we should think of opportunities like that to incorporate other good things into it. So I think those would be other avenues beyond, beautification, I would say. And so we're trying to keep a keen eye, and that's what we saw when we went to Winnipeg. At first, engineers were resistant to add public art to public improvement projects, and then suddenly they were engaged in projects, and then started becoming the people that anticipated things that should be incorporated into public art. So into public projects that create interest in corridors, create interest at public facilities, and all those sorts of things. So I think it could, we kind of led with the beautification, but I think as we move forward, some really great examples. There might be other opportunities as we make improvements to our facilities and infrastructure to incorporate interest that kind of accentuate what we're doing from a public infrastructure perspective.
And are we doing that with Demers or University? Both of those are kind of under construction right now.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. I think with University and, Cooley to Columbia Plus, and we're assisting with that. Right now we're focused on Demers Avenue just because it was a DOT project. We focused our energy onto streetscape elements that would fit within their purview. But the exciting part of the Demers Avenue project, a lot of the things that are going to be set up are going to be electrified as part of it, so that we will have opportunities for electrified obelisk and those sorts of things as part of it. That will come as part of phase 2 and 3 as part of that Demers Avenue project. It will be set up to do some public art interest things. And as you recall, I think we're calling it the Selkirk Condo, otherwise known as the Arbor Lot. There's a walkway through there that we want to create interest and incorporate public art into that place, and whether it's a sculpture walk or something else. Working with the University of North Dakota on that Cooley to Columbia, plus all the way to the 42nd. Again, that we're going to focus in on streetscape, but I think what will come after will be some public art elements as part of that project too. So I think those are two great corridors that we're creating. And I think the point is, as my friend Mr. Bierke is here, he always wanted the downtown just to be done. But I think what we've discovered, whether it's the UND campus, whether it's the downtown Grand Forks, that let's hope we're never done, so that we can create a better and better community as we move forward. So it's not done until, it gets renewed again, and we're going to probably start all over.
Well, and I guess one of my concerns with not having the MOU in place is I know we've discussed the Park District doing maintenance. Is that still an ongoing discussion? Is that something, I think that's one of those reasons that we wanted that MOU to get sorted out, or if that's something we need to be working on as the construction is working on this one.
Yeah, Mayor Brown, Councilmember Mott, I agree. I think as we bring through this plan, we'll bring through, if there's a specific agreement on this plan, and then also memorializing who's going to do what, that will be all part of this plan right now. And for instance, currently right now at the Alaris Center, they're responsible for all the operation maintenance. I think when we bring this one through, the operation maintenance will be done by the Park District. And of course, Mr. Palmosine, I think, is on the PAC board. And we just want to memorialize that. So whomever's here 25 years from now, we recognize who's doing what. So we'll bring that through as part of the June. We'll say that May-June process that Mr. Gaddy talked about, that will come through as part of that.
Thank you. Any further comments, Ms. Marshall?
I almost hate to ask this question because I'm really supportive of this project. And it's supportive of public art within our community. I think it will benefit and raise the quality of life for everyone. Are there any design features that will prevent people from climbing on this particular piece?
Mr. Jovic.
Do you also, Sean, want to take a stab at this? It was specifically the artist is putting this on a pedestal and putting it in the air to prevent kids, and also then the landscaping in front of it and bushes and everything else, just to prevent kids and others from sort of climbing on it. So sort of a natural barrier, but a very attractive barrier. So the answer is yes, the artist is very mindful of this. The good news is we're dealing with an artist who's done a lot of public art using rocks, and this is an issue in every community in which he deals with, and so he's very mindful of it.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vian.
Yeah, I'm just going to finish up with a couple, as your representative on the Alaris Commission, just to remind you, the Alaris Commission did look at this. We reviewed it and approved it, obviously to the level that the Alaris Commission could. And also, I was going to remind everybody, you said Thursday, 5:30 is the opening of the Alaris Center art opening, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I would remind people, I think it's a great time to come out and see some good art. So if we could put a plug in for that.
Well, thank you very much. Any further council comments? Thank you for your presentation. Now we go to 2.2, proclamations. A.
Poppy Day, Monday is May 25th, 2019.
So we have a proclamation, Poppy Day, American Legion Auxiliary, May 25th, 2019. America is a land of freedom preserved and protected willingly and freely by citizen soldiers. Millions who have answered the call to arms have died on the fields of battle. A nation at peace must be reminded of the price of war and the debt owed to those who have died in war. The red poppy has been designated as a symbol of sacrifice of lives in all wars. The American Legion Auxiliary has pledged to remind America annually of this debt through the distribution of the memorial flower. Now therefore, Mayor of Grand Forks, North Dakota does hereby proclaim Saturday, May 25th, 2019 as Poppy Day, and asks that all citizens pay tribute to those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of freedom by wearing the memorial poppy on this day. Is it Monday or Saturday?
It's the 20th.
It's the 25th, that's what we got. We got the 25th. Item B.
Arbor Day, May 21st, 2019.
So celebrate Arbor Day. In 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And the holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. Trees are a renewable resource by giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. Trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. Trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. So now there, Michael Brown, Mayor of Grand Forks, North Dakota, to hereby claim May 21st, 2018 as Arbor Day in the city of Grand Forks. And the good news is with Discovery Middle School, 40 fourth graders and I planted 40 trees in 40 minutes, and we didn't lose any fingers or any children. So we take great pride in Discovery School helping us do that. Item 3, public hearings and second readings of ordinances. 3.1.
Public hearing and application for property tax incentive for new or expanding business from Acme Motor Incorporated, doing business as acmetools.com, located at 1851 South 48th Street.
I'll open the public hearing on 3.1. I'll close the public hearing on 3.1. Council comments. Mr. Weber motions. Second, Ms. Marshall. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, carries. Thank you. 3.2.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance annexation of Sunny Nodak Farms Edition, located at 6367 Gateway Drive.
I'll open a public hearing on 3.2. Close the public hearing on 3.2. Council action on 3.2. Mr. Vian. Motion. Second, Ms. Dockler. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, carries. Thank you. Item 3.3.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance dedicating right-of-way on the plat of Southern Estates 12th re-subdivision. This item was tabled on August 1st, 2018.
So, Mr. Brooks, and after your presentation, I'll open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just want to go through a quick review of this item. It was last before you last August, and I'll kind of start with a kind of a larger map area just so everybody can see where we're at and then really what the request is before you today. So first I kind of want to do some general directions of where we're at. Here's Columbia Road. that runs north and south through this area. Up here on the north is 40th Avenue South. Just off the bottom of the map is 47th. So we're looking at a parcel of land that's on the east side of Columbia in between 25th Street and Columbia Road, north of 45th, and then on the north side is 40th Avenue South. Currently, this land is platted commercial property in its entirety. It is unplatted at this time, and there's a small piece that we're still looking at doing annexation with that'll follow on here later. So that middle portion here is still working on annexation. So with that, the developer is interested. There's actually two developers in this property. There's a commercial piece that's along the front side of Columbia Road, and then there's townhome development that's looking to go on the east side of the property and just on the west side of South 25th Street. So if you can hold for me just a second, I'll quickly show that for you. So this is 40th up here at the top, and here's that row of townhomes that I spoke of. Here's 43rd Avenue South and 40th just off the top, and here's 45th down here. So the townhomes as part of this plat are being put in, and then the follow-on item is the zoning, which will bring those into compliance. So we're actually taking out some land out of commercial and putting it into residential to allow for those townhomes here on the east side of the development and just on the west side of South 25th Street. We feel from a planning staff that that's appropriate. We want to provide some additional buffer to the homes here that are single family in nature for the most part, and providing some additional buffer from them from the new commercial development that'll be coming in. In addition, staff requested two items. We asked for the connecting path here that's up on the north side of the development, connecting to Columbia and 40th, just off the map here. And we asked for an additional connection here at 43rd. One of those was approved by Planning and Zoning Commission, the one on the north. The one on the south was not approved by Planning Commission moving forward, so those were staff recommendations. Other than that, we did receive favorable responses in terms of the development itself for the commercial coming in, and then those additional residential homes. Like I said, those are going to be added buffers. So with that, that's where the current recommendation from Planning Commission is to move forward with the development with that additional pedestrian access up on the north. And I know there were some other questions that you may have.
Mr. Vian.
Mr. Brooks, you talk about commercial. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the commercial development is? The plat, zoning, and annexation, maybe not so exciting always, but it sounds like they're coming forth with a nice development.
Well, what I'll show you is it's a concept plan only right now. And this one is shifted. So north now is to the right here. And we're always a little bit cautious on these because, you know, the exact placement and those types of things haven't been completely looked at by staff as of yet. But what the developer has told us, and they are in the audience here as well, but that between 45th and what would be 43rd Avenue, they're looking at medical office in nature and in terms of what uses they'd be. And then to the north, we're more retail restaurant style. So as you look at D, G, H, I, E, F, and J, K, these would be more retail restaurant type development. So a little bit higher use at different times of the day as well when we typically look at those. So that's kind of what they're looking at right now. Of course, they don't have, to my knowledge at this point, I don't think they have anybody signed on for any of them. So.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because it looks like a nice development. You'll need access, obviously, to the site. That'll be a part of what we look at here in the plat, I would assume.
Correct.
What you're going to do for access off of Columbia Road. And so this is kind of high-level concept at this time.
Yeah, this one, this is the concept that they pitched to us. It's more of a, for utility purposes, engineering needs to look at that and make sure everything's accounted for in terms of ponding and those types of things, and where the utility connections will come. But with that kind of becomes what their preliminary footprint potentially could be, so.
When would the detailed development plans, would there be any coming forward?
Prior to building anything, they would need to come before us and submit a detailed development plan, and it's very possible that that'll come in phases. It could be that between 43rd and 45th comes in one phase, and then to the north of that in another phase.
Okay, thank you.
Will there be a bike path or a sidewalk on South Columbia Road?
Yeah, yes, we do those all the time. So on the west side of Columbia, we have had requests in the past for TE funds or TA funds on those, and I think we're going to get hopefully notification on that soon when that is. And on the east side, we should be looking at a sidewalk there, which is typical along both sides of Columbia. So we'd be looking at those as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weber? Oh, Ms. Marshall?
What are the plans and proposals, either or, for completion of 43rd Avenue South, both on the west and the east side of Columbia?
Well, on the west side, in this case, I know that the request has come in for 43rd to connect from essentially to the west, leading into towards the school there, which is Discovery on the west side. That request, I believe, is this year. I'll look at Al, and I believe that's a this year project. Yeah. And then on the east side, that would be part of that private development. So on the east side, so this piece here would be part of their private street. And I think that would come in with this development. Their first phase, they'd be bringing that in.
So it looks like on the east side, it ends in a dead end or a cul-de-sac?
Yeah, that's the one option that they're showing
And
here, yeah.
that's the high-level concept at this
Yep.
point.
Whether it bulb like that or just cut off, there's, could cut at this second entrance in potentially. That's still high level still that we'd be working with them on.
So is there consideration of it going straight through and connecting with?
No, we have had that question. Actually, if you go back and look at the plat, they actually have lots that would be blocking those, so those would be sellable lots. And I have received that question. I have one in my inbox now that has asked that question. For that road to go through, that would be something that would have to come back before you to get that road to come through, because I think that is a concern of some in the neighborhood.
Right.
So, yeah, the initial request last fall did have that. The developers took that out at their request, and so that's why we're before you now. That it's not something that they could just put in without going back through this approval, because that is set up as a residential lot, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, then? Comments?
Sure. Could we go back to the area where you were showing the proposed commercial development?
Oh, yeah, I see.
There
where
was Area 1 and Area 2. Area 1 is proposed medical offices
Yes.
and office space. Area 2 is more restaurants, more retail focused. Is that my understanding?
That's my understanding, but the developers are here that could probably enlighten us a bit more if you had more detailed questions on that.
Well, I'll go to my next question, and maybe this is the question that needs to be answered. Why is it necessary to provide vehicle access between Area 1 and Area 2? Is there some reason that there has to be vehicle access, or is it possible to provide access directly from Columbia to both Area 1 and Area 2?
For our spacing requirements, first of all, there's 43rd here, and that, if you'll allow me to go back to our larger piece here, here's 43rd as it comes in. So that split that you'd be talking about, this is where that location is, and we do have access control along Columbia Road on that plat. We allow an opening here, and we're also allowing an opening here, because that meets our spacing requirements, because you do want to have those spaced.
And you're saying an opening on the west side or on the east side of Columbia?
Both, they'll be both.
On both?
Yep,
At
so what you'll
43rd
see.
And at Star?
Yep, at Star as well. So if I go back to that plat, this this would be Star Avenue here, and you see where we have that opening on the plat. And this will be the official legal document that's approved and moving forward. It shows an opening there. Now, the type of opening that's going to be, we're still, the developer has requested, I believe, a 3/4 intersection there. And they're looking for a full access here with a likelihood of a light. And so what we've looked at when we've looked at this, this corridor, I'll use the analogy of what Washington Street looks like between 40th and 47th. We have signalized at 40th and 47th. On Columbia, it's 40th and 47th. At Washington and 44th, we're having the request for a light as well. That's the entrance into Choice. And so 43rd and Columbia is about that equivalent in terms of spacing and those types of things. So that's why 43rd kind of becomes that next piece where you're going to see access. Now, the one thing we won't have here, this will not go all the way through, but it does provide for the spacing along Columbia Road in terms of access to the commercial and then access over to the school on the west side.
So at Star, there's an access to Area 2 from the other drawing.
Yep, I'll go back to that for you.
But currently, the only access to Area 1 would be this 43rd Avenue access. And is that just by habit, precedent, whatever, that we have to have it there? Or is it possible to put another opening into Area 1 other than at 43rd Avenue?
Well, I should point out that they're talking additionally a private access across the south end drainway here at 40th.
Okay.
So this goes across the drainway and then connects up with 40th Avenue South as well.
And is there one on the south end then as well?
Yep. So here's your access out here to
Vehicles can get in
45th.
from the north or south?
Yep, that's
to
correct.
Areas 1 and 2?
Yep.
So I'll ask the question again. Is it necessary to have vehicular access between Area 1 and Area 2, given the fact that they have very different applications, one being office, the other being more retail focused?
I think the more spots, the more access that we have, the better in this case, because if somebody wants to go from this office to a retail, we'd like them to go here versus out to 45th, around, and then into, if somebody from the office wants to, let's say there's a coffee shop or a restaurant here or something, we wouldn't want them to go out and around. We'd want them to connect their parking lots, which is typically what we do.
But basically, we've designed the entire neighborhood so that if you want to get from one place to another, you have to go a long way around anyway at present.
Well, and that was a request from the neighborhood. When last fall, when they had that conversation, they didn't want that vehicular connection at 43rd.
If I'm on 42nd and I want to go to the coffee shop in Area 2, I'm going to have to go all the way around. And so asking someone to go that little bit of way around from Area 1 to Area 2 doesn't seem excessive to me. But I've asked the question enough. Thanks for entertaining that. Yeah.
Further council comments or questions? Mr. Vian?
Just one question, Mr. Brooks. There is the request from the developer was for a signalized intersection.
Yeah, that's correct.
At 43rd.
Yes.
And that intersection actually will have access to both sides.
That's correct.
I'm going to assume as a developer that that's essential.
Yes, they've let us know that that's.
If you don't have that, I don't know if you have a development, is possible.
I think it's very important to them.
But it is.
I'll let them answer.
If you're going to have the buildings, they need to get there.
Yep.
You need to get traffic in and out.
That's correct.
Okay. Further comments, Mr. Phelan?
Mayor Brown, Mr. Sandy can't be here, but he asked he asked some of his constituents in the audience that I could read his email for the record so that everyone understands before they come up for the public hearing, they kind of see his perspective. The email is sent to Al, Brad, and Ryan. That's Al Grasser, Brad Gangler, and Ryan Brooks. And it says, for City Council reference, the following relates to Southern Estates Development and Neighborhood meeting I held last night, which was last week. This Southern Estates development lies between 40th and 47th Avenue South and between 25th and Columbia Road. This has been discussed at multiple P&Z meetings and at council a couple of times in one form or another. It was items 3-2, 3-3, and 3-4 on May 1. Planning and zoning meeting, item 3.3 is in the question as city staff wants to dedicate right away for the bike path to run through a new commercial development from the neighborhood at 25th Street all along the east-west to Columbia Road stoplight at Columbia Road and 43rd Avenue South. I had a pretty good turnout for a meeting, 17 adults and about 6 children. I recognize the entire neighborhood wasn't polled, and 17 is a small sample, but I believe what I heard was statistically significant. Of the 17 people who attended, only one person indicated he wanted a bike path into the neighborhood. The main concerns were the traffic in the parking lot, which would be required to go over the bike path at 2 different locations within the commercial development. The consensus was the parents were concerned the cars in the parking lots were more of a danger to the kids than having kids ride or walk down to 40th and cross Columbia Road at that intersection. The neighbors did say they would be okay with a bike path if it was curbed the entire way, thus not having any parking lot cross the bike path. But I'm not sure if the developers would be okay splitting their property into the north and south areas, i.e. one area wouldn't be accessible to anyone who enters the stoplight at 43rd. I think that's what Mr. Weber was talking about. Additionally, the neighbors are concerned about the future commercial property on the west side of Columbia Road on 43rd Avenue. They indicated they didn't know what was going to be developed across Columbia Road and didn't like the idea of having their kids traveling from one commercial space to the east and then past another commercial space to the west. They indicated the current path along 40th Avenue South has no intersections or crossings other than at Columbia Road. Parents like the path on 40th and want their kids to continue using 40th. I explained to them the traffic on 40th and Columbia will be much more significant than at 43rd Avenue South. But again, with commercial on both sides of Columbia Road, the consensus was the kids should stay on 40th. The general consensus was the neighbors wanted the development to go in, and most didn't have a problem with the stoplight at 43rd and Columbia. Parenthetical, 12 were okay with the stoplight, 2 said no, and 3 were undecided, unparenthetical. I spent a considerable amount of time talking about the shortest distance between 2 paths is a straight line, trying to help the neighbors understand the concerns of our engineering and planning departments, i.e. without the bike path, kids will go around the twin homes and then cut back through the commercial development to the stoplight at 43rd Avenue to save some distance. But the parents didn't believe that would be a problem, as once the kids get to the end of the twin homes, it's about the same distance to stay on 40th. So after listening to the neighbors, the developer, planning and zoning commission, the concerns of our city staff, and in my opinion, the best option for compromise is to put the stoplight at 43rd but leave out the bike path. That would make most parties happy. Therefore, I urge our city council to approve the recommendation of the planning and zoning commission, i.e. provide final approval of the plat for Southern Estates 12th subdivision, which specifically excludes the pedestrian easement at 43rd Avenue South. For clarity, city staff are urging council to include an access easement with the final plat. However, the neighborhood doesn't want the access, the developer doesn't want the access, the planning and zoning commission didn't want the access, and I don't want the access. For additional information for the city council, I highly recommend everyone go back and watch the Facebook Live recording of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting from May 1st. The commission had an hour-long conversation about the issue, and I believe did a very good job identifying the issues and explaining their reasoning for not wanting the access easement. Unfortunately, I will be out of country this next week. I would hate to put the developers off any longer, so I'm happy to have the council act on this Monday evening. Please let me know if you have any clarifications. Finally, and lastly, I trust our engineering and planning departments. I believe they are doing what they believe is best. Unfortunately, on this issue, I disagree, but thank them for their passion and continued efforts to always do what they believe is right. My best, Dana Sandy City Council Representative for Ward 6.
Thank you. So any more council comments? If not, I'll open the public hearing on 3.3. Who would like to address the council? So please come forward, state your name and address, and make your remarks.
Mayor, Councilman, my name is Sanford Case. I live at 2164 43rd Avenue South.
Thank you.
I think I speak for many of my neighbors when I say we generally support the proposed layout for this development. It's greatly improved from what came forward last summer. Our main concern is the sidewalk that city staff is requesting on 43rd Avenue. it poses some real safety concerns to send children through the back of a commercial area and then across the parking areas just to get to a stoplight and cross. When, if the fence is put up along the separation boundary, the kids will be forced to go around the edges of the commercial district in areas with much better visibility and keep them out of the traffic in the heart of the development. So for safety concerns, we'd like you to please leave that sidewalk out. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. I'm Tyler Brandt from Fargo, North Dakota, and I am one of the developers, myself and Enclave. We have been in front of you guys a few times now, and we're just trying to make it work for, I mean, we want the residents to come to this shopping center, and we want to do what's best for the neighborhood and the kids, and so we came here originally with streets going through, which was in the 20-year plan, or the plan that the city had. So we thought that was just going to be just fine. So we put those in. So, but that was never, that was because they were there. So we're fine changing that and making some adjustments. Some of that, the office park is going to be medical, but there is some components too that will be just some office, you know, some other office uses, and we do have quite a few tenants already in the office park that are ready to go. So as soon as we get this done, we need to put a shovel in. We need to start building those because we do have leases committed to those. The retail, we don't have as much. What our plan to do is to do one building out there, start with that, fill that, and then continue, you know, once people see it and understand it, we'll have more traction to do the next building. So these plans could change, but we want to do it right. And we, you know, we've done quite a few developments here in Grand Forks, Enclave has, and I've done quite a few in Fargo, and they're nice looking buildings, and we try and make a professional image, and we make sure the streets, we don't want people racing through from the north side to the south side. We make them so the streets don't line up perfect. So they gotta, you know, they gotta slow down, and they can't be, because we don't want that either. We want our, you know, it's safe for our people that are shopping there and working there, etc. So the plan is to really do some professional landscaping to really make it look nice and something that the neighborhood would be proud of, and hopefully have neighborhood amenities that instead of going to 32nd, which is very busy, you might be able to do it out of 40th. So.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Further comments? Okay, we'll close the public hearing on, well, they got to come forward. If you want to speak, please state your name and address.
Allie Parkinson, 614 Plain Hills Drive. I'm also the principal of Discovery Elementary School, and I'm here just to capture sort of the perspective of the district. I have a few bullet points that Dr. Brenner, the superintendent of Grand Forks Public Schools, and Mr. Thompson, assistant superintendent, have relayed to a couple people within the city, and I just wanted to make sure those bullet points were noted in public tonight. We've asked, we've stated that we are not in favor of a stoplight at Columbia and 43rd. We believe that this will add more pedestrian bike traffic in a commercial area, and it will have too much traffic. We also believe that it would be worth looking into to improve the bike path by the paving. Currently, there's a wood chip path that all of our students use when biking to school, and this is the route that most students use when walking or riding to school. It encourages them to use the stoplight at Columbia and 40th. We believe that more intersections where our cars are stop-starting en route on Columbia makes things actually more dangerous, more places for cars to look for kids when they're arriving and leaving school. We also work with Safe Kids Grand Forks, where we do a walking field trip where we walk our students to 40th and Columbia with Safe Kids, and we teach them how to cross that intersection. We have bike path groups of kids where they all bike together and they use that path. It is something that we've invested in for 4 years, and we feel like that's the safest path for our kids to get to school. We also are supportive of the development. We're a new neighborhood. We feel like that's a great thing for our neighborhood. We just feel like the added intersection makes things much less safe for our students, our elementary age students. You may or may not know, we've had 3 students hit at the intersection of 40th and Columbia since I've been at Discovery in the last 4 years. It is a very dangerous intersection, and adding another intersection, I believe, makes more opportunities with kids scattered, and crossing at different locations makes things less safe. Thank you.
Thank you. So anyone else wish to address the council? No, Mr. Weber?
So now we have a recommendation for no light at 43rd from the school district? But that's not being considered tonight, is it? Is
No.
the issue of the light is not even being considered? Okay.
Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing on 3.3. Now council comments on 3.3. Mr. Behan?
I will just start out. I think the development that's been proposed, planning and zoning, many of the neighborhood are all in agreement with it. We've heard the I think 3/4 intersection at Star is what the developer wants, and I think I'm understanding planning and zoning and all are in agreement with that. The full signalized intersection at 43rd, we have been in agreement. And so the question that seems to be the only thing is should there be a pedestrian access where 43rd went through or not? I think we have pretty much agreement on all aspects of this development now except that one. And the planning and zoning has come forth on a 4-3 vote against having that put in, if I'm accurate with that. It was unanimous, but it was certainly their recommendation to do that. And we either have to concur with that or go with what I'm hearing staff recommendation from both the planning and the engineering department for different purposes of that should remain in there from their technical advice or recommendation to the council, right? Okay. And so we've got 2 different bodies with 2 different ideas of what needs to be done, and we get to make the final decision.
Go ahead.
So I'm just laying that all out so that we can have a discussion. As I looked at it, there 45th, is it? I should look on my computer. Is already in. So anybody who was going to go east or west at 43rd has to go 2 blocks south to 45th, go over, and then come back up. That's going to be the misdirection that people are going to have to go that are walking. Or you can go to the north. But if you go to the north, the way it's pretty much set up, you'd have to go up to Star. And depending on how that's controlled, you'd either be able to cut across at Star or have to go all the way north to 40th to get to that signalized intersection. I think for sure we don't want anybody crossing along here except at 40th, 43rd, especially pedestrians. I don't think we want them at 45th either, because that's dangerous. I think, is that a right in, right out at 45th, or is that a full intersection?
3/4.
That's a 3/4 intersection. So pedestrian crossings hopefully would take place at 47th, 43rd, and 40th, right? That's where we're promoting pedestrian traffic to cross. And regardless of whether we put this access right away in or not, that's what we're looking for. How best to utilize those areas to cross. And so I've gone back and forth. I've talked to Mr. Sandy today, and then looked at it and have been on the edge here on trying to figure out what makes the most sense, because you create misdirection. If people are trying to walk in the winter, you're going to have them walk an extra 4 blocks. It'd be nice to have 43rd in. It also gives access from that subdivision to the shops that are on, and the subdivision on Columbia Road. The issue seems to be primarily students in that right of way, and how best to keep them safest. And I'm not for sure one is clear cut over the other that will keep the students safe. I do believe you can try to do the best job you can to engineer safety. That's what we would want to do with misdirection and landscaping and visibility or whatever. You can also do that. But I just wanted to maybe lay a few of those things out for everybody to think and consider. And because child safety is really, really paramount, we also can direct the children on where to go, I would believe also. If you don't want them to go down 43rd, then you tell them not to. And then they would use either 40th, or you want to get them down to 47th, so you got a safe crossing. Because if you try to go on 45th, again, that's a 3/4, and you don't want them on that. So making it as easy as you can for the students to cross and not to cross mid-block is also important, for however we do that. So I just want to state those comments to begin with, and then listen to what else anybody else would have to say.
Okay, further comments? Ms. Mock? Oh, Ms. Marshall? Okay.
I would just have concerns about, the fact that we've got a neighborhood that has stood up largely in opposition to putting in a sidewalk here or an easement for a sidewalk that could lead to a future sidewalk. We also have the school district opposed to this being a route for children to cross Columbia Road. And I'm having a real struggle with seeing how it could be safer to have a sidewalk than not. And, I'm leaning towards not having a sidewalk and not having a right-of-way that would lead to a future sidewalk just for ultimate safety. I go through the intersection at 40th and Columbia at least 4 times a day, and spent some time driving around the neighborhood today, and I really struggle with how we introduce a danger factor by encouraging pedestrian traffic at 43rd at that crossing.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mock?
I did watch the planning and zoning meeting just to get more familiar and understand some of the concerns. And when I look at it, I do think that people tend to go the shortest distance and cross where the shortest distance is. Okay. The issue I have with having 43rd go through and having a sidewalk be there is that it's essentially sending a message that it's safe for kids to cross there and for kids to go through there. And if we're going to put commercial in those lots and then send kids through and make it easy, then I think we are going to see kids crossing at 43rd. We're going to see them going through parking lots, and I don't think it will be as easy to just say they should go up to 40th to cross. And it seems with the development that we now have, we can essentially cut that off by just putting a townhome there. And that way you keep the commercial traffic, if it comes off of 43rd, you keep that in the commercial area. You'd have that buffer of townhomes. I don't see that as being an easy access point, so I see it as being a little easier to say that kids just cross at 40th, and that way we keep a cohesive message for any kids that might be going by bike or might be walking to school. And I know that is a little bit out of the way, and that is, something that's maybe concerning if kids are trying to walk in the winter, but I think we want to make sure that everything we do as far as a planning and more of a bike pedestrian emphasis, that we're not only thinking about the shortest distance, but we're also thinking about the safest distance. And if the shortest distance isn't safe, we want to make it not as easy. We want to reroute the traffic, like you were talking about, Mr. Veen. And so I think if I'm understanding the proposal, if we would move forward with the planning and zoning recommendation, that would be to include the townhomes to have access off of 43rd, but it wouldn't go directly into the neighborhood. That was, if I'm understanding right, that was their final recommendation from planning and zoning.
Okay, further comments? Mr. Weber?
I haven't studied urban design. I've read a couple of books and attended some seminars, but I don't see a good way out of this because I think this is bad design. We have funneled all of the traffic into a couple places. And now the idea that we've had school children hit at the main crossing, where we're now recommending that we not only maintain that crossing, but continue to focus even more people crossing there, seems unfortunate. But I don't see a good way out of it. But this idea of limiting all of the entrance to just a single way in and out of these neighborhoods has helped to create this problem. And that's unfortunate. It's heretical, but it really actually is important to start building walkable neighborhoods. Sitting is the new smoking, and this includes sitting in cars. And this is great that you're going to have a commercial development with neighborhood. You could have neighborhood restaurants, neighborhood coffee shops, things, but it's only going to be accessible by vehicle. When you've got all these neighborhoods around that could easily get there, except we've designed the streets so that they really can't get there except by getting in a car. This could have been a very walkable neighborhood, and we've designed it so that it turns out it isn't. And that's just a comment. Thanks.
So, Mr. Brooks, did we build roads without sidewalks in this community? You said there's going to be bike paths on the west of Columbia.
On the west side of Columbia, yep.
Will there be a sidewalk on the east?
Yes, there will.
So that invites children to take the shortest route between two spots.
That's correct.
Okay. So we need a motion and a second.
Well, to get it out,
yes,
I will make the motion that we approve the plat minus the easement for the sidewalks.
Okay, so we have a motion before us. Do we have a second?
I'm sorry, your motion is consistent with
Yes, it's consistent with the recommendation from planning and zoning.
And what the school district is proposed and the neighborhood is proposed.
Right, all of them.
Okay. So we have a motion before us. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Mock seconds. Mr. Weigel, comment?
No, I was just going to second that.
Okay, so we have a motion before us.
Well, the school system still isn't in favor of this because they don't want a signalized intersection at all.
But, okay, so let's do a roll call vote.
Weigel?
Yes.
Doppler? Yes. Weber?
Aye.
Mogg? Yes. Marshall? Yes. Sandy? Not here. Bean? Here. It passes.
Motion passes. Thank you. We move on to item 3.4.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance to amend the zoning map related to Southern Estates PUD Concept Development Plan, Amendment Number 11, and this item was also tabled on August 1st, 2018.
I'll open the public hearing on 3.4. We'll close the public hearing on 3.4. Council comments on 3.4. Mr. Weber? Motion, second. Ms. Marshall, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed carries, thank you. 3.5.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance, annexation, Southern Estates 12th re-subdivision, and this item was tabled on August 1st, 2018.
Open the public hearing on 3.5. Close the public hearing on 3.5. Mr. Gangler, do you wish to speak?
No, sir.
Okay. Need a council action on 3.5. Mr. Vian motions, Ms. Marshall seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. 3.6.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance dedicating right-of-way on the plat of Edgewood Village First Re-subdivision.
I'll open the public hearing on 3.6. We'll close the public hearing on 3.6. Council action on 3.6.
Move approval.
Ms. Marshall, Mr. Weigel motions then. Second. Ms. Marshall. Discussion on 3.6, Mr. Vian.
On the very southeast corner, there's the unplatted property.
Yes, right now, if we could maybe just back up a little bit, for this project, agenda items 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, and 3.9 are all part of the same project. We have a plat, a PUD, a vacation, and the annexation. So on the map on the screen, the very southeasterly corner of the development right now is not a part of this development, part of the plat or part of the PUD. Right now, I think it's still a residential structure. I think it may be platted, but it's never been zoned anything other than ag. So it's just a remnant lot that at some point, and I have talked with folks that spoke on behalf of the owners that at some point when this other land is being developed, it's probably going to make that area more ripe for redevelopment as well.
Is it platted to the east?
To the east of the...
Yep.
Yes, to the east, there's some contractor shops, and then you get into the Stones Mobile area. So that whole area is platted and zoned. It's just this remnant lot here that is still yet probably ripe for redevelopment at some point.
So this development will lead to 45th, is it 45th Avenue to a dead end?
Right now, as Mr. Bean indicated, where the cursor is, right now that is platted as 45th Avenue. And we've had a number of discussions with the Park District, and they've indicated their desire to vacate that stretch. So that probably will be coming forward at some point. Just to give you an idea of the overall development scheme, one of the agenda items is to vacate the southerly portion of South 19th Street, which I have highlighted in green. So that is also on the agenda tonight, to vacate that. And then again, probably on a follow-on meeting series, the Park District will come forward more than likely and request to vacate the stretch of 45th from 20th going easterly.
And right now, between 19th and 20th, that's park, right?
Correct.
And that the intent is that would remain park.
Right. You may see some agenda item coming up perhaps next month with some talk about the very northerly part of this development, but everything you see essentially from the whole area between 40th and 47th and 20th and 19th has been from 1996 or 97 just carried as park and or school property. Obviously things have changed over the years and there's no longer a school, but for what this development, in addition to again vacating South 19th, assuming the Park District does move forward and request 45th, at that point then there's no more east and west connections through the park area as shown today.
Maybe one of my questions is that you said assuming if they don't, you have a dead end street.
Correct. And that's something that we'll have to work with them. If they don't, for whatever reasons, don't decide to vacate it, then whatever internal use when the streets get developed, it'll have to either have some sort of bulb or a hammerhead turnaround. If the street is to go in, it'll have to have a sufficient turnaround.
Okay. But right now, again, that's what we're stuck with, is a dead-end street, which isn't typical of what we would approve.
Correct, right. On paper, it's still a dead-end platted street, knowing that the Park District wants to move forward with seeking approval for the vacation.
And the elimination of South 19th Street, again, adjacent to a park, removes a lot of, well, parking for people who would use the park. You no longer do you have street parking.
Correct, right, that would be the logical conclusion if the street's not going to get put in. But there are, I know the developer for this particular project has worked and discussed with the Park District in terms of ultimately what the disposition of the land once it is vacated. So part of the idea was, in this case, the bottom cursor is South 19th Street, so the area in hatched represents the area that would be vacated. And essentially, I think with the plan between the Park District and the developer is to, to do away with the street, just to create more of that physical connection between the ultimate development of the long-term assisted living and all the other developments that are going to occur, to have the park being an adjacent amenity, therefore, vacating the street to make that connection.
Correct me if I'm wrong, on a normal vacation, half the property goes to one side and half goes to the other?
That's correct, and it's up to then the two individual parties to agree to whether or not it's a half split, or it's really up to the two adjoining property owners to negotiate ultimately the disposition of their half, so to speak.
So what's happening in this case?
With that, I guess more specifically, I could call on the developer who is here, who can speak directly to that relationship between the development and the Park District.
Welcome, Mr. Giese.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for being here. That vacation of 19th is really important. Actually, it enhances the connection between the senior facility and the Park District. As far as negotiations, I'm sorry, but I don't have that answer right now. I know I've got, my partner, John Miscavige, has been working on that, but I don't have the answer for that.
So do you see the crossing of the Greenway, or the Drainway happening soon too, so you have access to the east?
On the east side there?
Yeah, on 40th, or 44th, I should say.
We do. Yeah, I think that connection to the hospital system over there is pretty important.
Is important, so
Yep.
that would be part of an early phase of this, you would expect?
I don't know. All I know is it's an important connection, and we need to have that connection to that facility over there.
But right, that is the intention, is to be able to connect 19th all the way east to Washington, knowing
Right.
that we have a fully signalized intersection at 44th.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later. So.
Okay.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I believe we have a motion, the second before us, correct? So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. 3.7,
Public hearing on petition to vacate South 19th Street between 40th and 47th Avenue South within Southern Estates First Edition.
we're going to open the public hearing on 3.7. We'll close the public hearing on 3.7. Council action on 3.7. Mr. Weber motions, Ms. Dockler seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. 3.8.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance to amend the zoning map relating to Southern Estates PUD Concept Development Plan Amendment Number 12.
Open the public hearing on 3.8. Close the public hearing on 3.8. Council comments on 3.8. Mr. Weber motions. Second, Ms. Marshall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. 3.9.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance annexation Edgewood Village First Re-subdivision.
We'll open the public hearing on 3.9. Close the public hearing on 3.9. Yes, Mr. Vian.
Can I go back to my question? As long as we're doing the annexation, wouldn't it be worthwhile, instead of creating an area that's not annexed, to include that lot on the very southeast corner? Because it's annexed on three sides of it. It would seem to be that we would do that annexation now and not have, we've looked at that in other areas of the city where we have a spot that's not annexed and everything else is around it. Wouldn't it make sense to include that in this annexation?
Mr. Gangler, thoughts?
At this point, that property owner has not been talked to specifically about being a part of this annexation. So I guess if we decided at this point to incorporate that lot, I guess I would maybe would want to talk it over with Mr. Swanson in terms of the process taken to date for this, for the overall project versus adding it at this point. I don't know if that would change the course of the development cycle for it.
Mr. Swanson?
Mayor Brown, members of council, Mr. Vian, if you were to take that approach, you'd need to table this tonight until communication could be had with the property owner. You do not have a petition for annexation from that property owner, and you are not proceeding based on a resolution. You are acting upon ordinance, which is a different format for annexation.
Thank
Brad,
you.
Brad, are you sure that's not annexed? Yeah, it is.
I stand corrected, it is annexed, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's just not platted, but
Okay.
the whole parcel does appear to be annexed, so.
Good.
Well, good, that answers my question. So I'll make a motion to approve the
Motion,
annexation.
Mr. Vian, second. Ms. Mock, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. Thank you. 310.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance to amend the zoning map relating to Columbia Park South, PUD, concept development plan, amendment number 3, Columbia Park 25th, re-subdivision.
I'll open a public hearing on 310. Close the public hearing on 310. Council action on 310. Mr. Weber, motion. Ms. Dockler, seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, carries. 311.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance to amend the zoning map relating to lots 13 and 14, Block 3, Budge and Eshelman's third edition.
Open the public hearing on 311. Close the public hearing on 311. Council comments on 311. Mr. Vian?
Just one quick question, maybe this is for Mr. Swanson. I know in the documents that we were rezoning to allow financing was part of the written comment. Is that accurate?
Mr. Swanson?
I have no information as to the purposes of the request. It would not be unheard of for those types of issues to be addressed in a request of this nature, but I don't have any personal knowledge.
Mr. Gangler?
Actually, this item kind of speaks to some of the proposed legislation coming out of this last session. What's highlighted in sort of this reddish color is our B3 general business. To the west is R2. The lot that I have highlighted in yellow right now is zoned B3 general business. However, it's a single family home. And what happens and what we've been told from time to time is that in these situations where this is clearly considered a non-conforming use, the structure itself may not be non-conforming, but the zoning makes it non-conforming. And we've heard over the years that in situations like this, it makes it very difficult for those individuals to go through lending, other scenarios, because technically, again, it's a non-conforming property. So in this case, staff took a look at the surrounding area and determined this home was built, I believe, in 1901, so it's never been used for anything other than a single-family home. So by doing this, we would incorporate it into the adjoining R2 district, which then erases that non-conforming status in terms of zoning, which then may, in turn, help if that's one of the outcomes of financing and whatnot. But it does place it in its proper zoning district, we think, as a residential use.
Mr. Gangler, you didn't hear from the neighbor next to them if they wanted to be included in, because it seems like you've got two lots here.
We reached out, we sent a letter and waited for any types of responses, but they just never did respond to staff. So we just decided we weren't going to hold this up. In the future, if that owner does come forward, then we would evaluate it at that time. But no, we weren't engaged by that owner.
I think, at the legislature, I did testify on projects just like this, as you're well aware of,
Yes, sir.
about trying to do this, and we said we would look at them individually. I know there was some issues about the reason that the rationale being financing, and And that was really what my question was about, if that was truly the holdup, because I think what we wanted to do was show the flexibility that the city has to address issues just like this.
And specifically in this case, it was brought to our attention by others that this non-conforming status was being a hindrance to what they needed to do.
So with that, I'd move approval.
Have a motion, do we have a second? Mr. Weber, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries, 312.
Public hearing on resolution of necessity and determination of protest for A, project number 7799, district number 717, paving along North 62nd Street between Gateway Drive to 500 feet north, and the finance department has had no protests.
Okay, so we'll open the public hearing on 312. We'll close the public hearing on 312. Council action on 312. Mr. Weber motions, Ms. Dockler seconds then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. Item 4, action items. Who would like action items pulled for discussion? I will pull 4, 5. If not, that leaves 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, 4-4, 4-6, 4-7, 4-8, 4-9, 4-10, 4-11, 4-12, 4-13, 4-14, 4-15, 4-16, 4-17, 4-18, and 4-19 for a motion and a second. Need a motion and a second. Ms. Mock motions. Ms. Marshall seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. Thank you. 4.5.
Create special assessment district for project number 8066, district number 568, sanitary sewer for South 19th Street between 40th and 44th Avenue South.
Mr. Grasser.
Thank you, Mayor Brown, members of City Council. There's been a slight change in the assessment district map between the Committee of the Whole and the City Council. What we discovered is some of the Park District property on the west side of 19th Street has been combined into one parcel. And just to make sure there isn't any confusion on that, we basically brought in Lot 6 within the assessment district because 5 and 6 are acting as one parcel. So I don't expect to see significant changes in benefits or anything like that. It's technical correction basically on our part.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weber motions. Second, Ms. Marshall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. We need 417 and 419 introduction to ordinance. Who would like to sponsor that? Ms. Mock, thank you. And then we go to item 5, informational items, 5.1.
Investment portfolio summary as of 3/31/2019.
And then 5.2.
Human Resource Quarterly Staffing Report 2019 Quarter 1.
Item 6, citizen request. Anyone wish to address the council? Hearing none, we go to item 7, approval of minutes and bills, 7.1.
7.1 is the vendor list.
Need a motion second to pay the bills. Ms. Marshall motions, Ms. Stockler seconds. All in favor say aye.
And no
Aye.
7.2.
No 7.2, the bills are paid. Item 8, city administrator comments. Mr. Phelan.
Mayor Brown and members of City Council, the mayor mentioned our trip to Washington DC to the Pentagon and to the Capitol Hill. So thanks for the mayor for leading our contingent there. And you should all know, as the mayor says, that Grand Forks Air Force Base is more well-known than ever, and that redesignation to a reconnaissance wing is a big deal for us after being 14 years as a realigned base, and now that we own as Grand Forks Air Force Base the Global Hawk mission. So that's a big deal across the globe. So we should take pride in that. That will be officially, as the mayor said, on June 28th. There'll be a ceremony to finally approve that. So I think the other thing the City Council should feel proud of, and the mayor, is our work on quality of life and public-private partnerships and all that we've done. So all the things that are important to us as residents of Grand Forks are important to the military and the Air Force. So whether it's healthcare, education, license reciprocity, and the like, that was really emphasized, that people in the military now, they don't have to re-up. And so if they're going to come to Grand Forks, it's critically important for us to have a great place here to live, work, play, and stay, as the mayor says, so that they continue to stay with the Air Force. So I think to continue to expand our mission here, we have to continue to create a great place in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So that was really emphasized there, and that's really a shift in mindset. And so thanks for the mayor for allowing us to go to the Pentagon to really emphasize all the great things about Grand Forks. The other thing I'm planning to set up on your behest, a city school district meeting, and I did follow up with Dr. Brenner, and he thought that would be a good idea too. So just jotting down some items, it kind of came out of growth and development. We should meet, and obviously we had one issue on tonight's agenda where we're dealing with growth and development in and around a Discover School. And probably some other things that we've been working together are school resource officers, behavioral health, youth commission, and other items. So my point is, if there are other things that you'd like to add to that agenda, I'll work with Mr. Brenner or Dr. Brenner, and we'll put an agenda together. So if we could target this summer, I'm thinking the June, July timeframe, and we would have a joint meeting with that. So any questions, concerns, or any agenda follow-ups, I will add that to the list and make sure that we can make that happen. And then finally, the other thing Mr. Sandy asked, or President Sandy, is that we move forward with the housing group and get them back together and start discussing that. So we'll continue to work on that. And I think finally, Mr. Weber, you chaired a growth fund committee. There's lots of great projects moving forward at Grand Forks. And I think even on the planning and zoning, we get mired in the trees of planning and zoning. But the bigger issue is that people are going to invest millions into Grand Forks as part of development. So I think sometimes we lose the forest for the trees, but the forest shows that things are going pretty well in Grand Forks, and let's keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item 9, Mayor and Council member comments. Councilman Weigel. Hearing none. Councilwoman Dockler. Councilman Weber.
Yeah, I feel like I'm pouring salt in the wound, but I'm frustrated with the 3.3. The item that we had such a long discussion on tonight. I don't think the vote either way was going to change the fact that we had a great opportunity to design a walkable, bikeable, human-scale neighborhood. Instead, there's going to be dozens of families living just 2 or 3 short blocks from possible shopping and dining, who are now going to be getting in their cars and driving 3 and 4 times that actual distance to get to their neighborhood shop. By the time it got to this point, there wasn't an easy way out of that. And so just frustrated with the unsatisfying vote we had to make tonight. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Councilwoman Mock. Ms. Marshall.
Just wanted to note that last Saturday was the 119th birthday of the Grand Forks Public Library. And while I wasn't able to be at it, I understand it was a really fun event, and look forward to some great things coming from our Grand Forks Public Library.
Now the brand is Grand Forks Public, which I'm adjusting to. Councilman Vian. And I need to reiterate and reinforce what Mr. Phelan said. These trips to the Pentagon are important because leadership changes. We need to continue to carry our story. And as apparently they've listened, and we're proud to be the home of Grand Forks Air Force Base, and quality of life is an important issue. I want to thank the legislature and the governor for helping us with those quality of life issues. And then we're proud to be the home of the National Guard's 1/8th Air Defense Artillery, and proud to be the home of the University of North Dakota, and proud to be the home of the Global Hawk community for the Air Force. And also Saturday, May 25th is Poppy Day, and then Arbor Day is May 21st. So with that, a motion to adjourn would be appreciated. Ms. Marshall motions, Mr. Vian quickly seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport. Your airport. Simply grand.
How many things in your house connect to the internet? Let's see. Computers, smartphones, gaming console, maybe your appliances and lights. They say that by the year 2020, the average home will have 5 devices for every one person. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be average. We're going to need much better internet.
Midco Extreme Gig is here. Life-changing.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
As a farm kid from North Dakota, I was raised to face challenges head-on. But that was put to the test when I was diagnosed with cancer as a teenager. Now, I'm determined to help kids overcome illnesses like I did. So I started my journey at the University of North Dakota. With hard work and determination, I'll help others like my doctors helped me. I'm making my impact. How will you make yours?